Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of the Cabinet of Barbados, members of the Parliament of Barbados, House of Assembly and Senate, members of the Executive and General Councils of the party, members of the Thompson family, and of course, members of the family of the Democratic Labour Party. Always a pleasure to share the fellowship of this great organization. Always better to be here than to be elsewhere in any way associated with that disgruntled and inept collection of well-organized self-seekers who have now taken to roaming Barbados at night, befouling the pleasant midnight air of their invective. We are where we ought to be, here on the sacred ground of the Democratic Labour Party. My pleasure is enhanced by the fact that we're here tonight to reminisce and reflect on the life of my friend and late colleague, David John Howard Thompson, with whom I have had a long and edifying relationship, as I said on Sunday, going back to the 1970s, the late 1970s, and ending, of course, on the day of his untimely death. David gave upwards of 1/2 of his life to the Democratic Labour Party, and we are therefore indebted to his family for making the sacrifice which they obviously made in making him available to us for so long. He served this party faithfully, in good times and in bad, and has left a legacy, yes, a legacy, of which we can all feel especially proud. My relationship with David, of course, had many dimensions. We served here at party headquarters when he was a very young man. I was a little older than he. And then, of course, after he qualified as a lawyer, we practiced law together. But there are some sides of David Thompson that I think a lot of people did not know. I was exposed to them in some very interesting ways. A lot of people did not know what I would call the mischievous side of David Thompson. In the year 1994, after the government of Barbados had collapsed after the no-confidence motion in the House of Assembly, and after the dissolution of Parliament, I received a call from a senior party member who was at my law office one afternoon, a Monday afternoon, received a call from a senior party official who said to me that the party intended to change its candidate in St. Philip South, and that all of the soundings they had done in St. Philip South, St. Philip North, St. John, and Upper Christ Church suggested that I would be the best person to run in St. Philip South. They said that I had taught for some years at the Princess Margaret Secondary School, and since St. John, St. Philip, Upper Christ Church, and Upper St. George fed the Princess Margaret School with students, that most of the young people in those areas knew me very well, and that it was thought I was the best person to run in St. Philip South. I said, well, thanks very much for the confidence, but I have a lot of legal business which I'm doing at the moment, from which I dare not separate myself at this time. But whoever the party chooses, I am prepared to support. The conversation ended quite politely. But about 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was David Thompson. He said, Freundel, we have a problem in St. Philip South. We are not going to run the candidate there again. And everybody thinks that you should be the candidate. I said, David, well, I just received a call to that effect, but I gave the explanation why I can't be the candidate at this time, but whoever the candidate is can count on my fullest support. He said, but Freundel, don't just dismiss it like that. I said, well, I'm not dismissing it like that, I'm just telling you like it is. He said, at least tell me that you will think about it. I said, okay, if that pleases you, I will think about it. And we chatted for a little while after that, and the conversation ended. That's a Monday afternoon around 2:30. The following morning, Tuesday morning, just after 5 in the morning, my telephone rang. And I thought that it was some client with a problem calling me. It turned out to be a very close friend of mine who started the conversation when I answered the phone with the word congratulations. I said, congratulations for what? The person said, it is in the paper. I said, well, what are you talking about? That you are the candidate for St. Philip South. I said, well, what madness are you talking? So I took up the phone and I called David, and once he heard my voice, he erupted into laughter. He said, I know what you said, man, but I want you to run, so I told the executive council that you will be the candidate, you've agreed to be the candidate for St. Philip South. So I had to push all of my legal business aside and to get on the ground in St. Philip South. And of course, I could count on David's emphatic and full support during that campaign. We worked very closely together. And of course, I was elected the Member of Parliament for St. Philip South. We went into opposition, of course, because we lost that election. And along with David, there was Erskine Sandiford, Branford Tate, Lawson Weeks. Dennis Kelman won his seat in St. Lucie for the first time, Hamilton Lashley, and of course, Mr. Johnny Tudor. At that time, he did not know that he was related to Grandy Adams. So, we began to work very closely together in the House. And one day, David said to me, Freundel, have you ever thought that you could be deputy leader of the opposition? I said I never thought about it because I've come and found all of these other people here, and I really, having regard to what the party just went through, I do not intend to be the cause of any further disruption in the Democratic Labour Party. Choose one of the persons that I came and found. He said, but if I wanted to choose one of them, I wouldn't have asked you. I said, well, anyhow, you don't try to create any problems to me. You deal with that. Choose one of the persons that preceded me, and whoever that person is, of course, I will support wholeheartedly. You don't have to worry about me. I am here, I am at your service, but I chose somebody who I have come and found. Let me spend some time learning. Said okay. And the times rolled on until the retired parliamentarian of St. Philip South, Mr. Freundel, died, and his body was lying for public viewing at St. Philip's Parish Church. David and I agreed that we would go and view the body on the same afternoon at the same time. When I arrived at St. Philip's Church, he had just arrived, so he alighted from his vehicle, and I got out of mine as well, and we were walking towards the church. He said, "Freundel, the parliamentary group met last night, and all of the fellows have said that they want you to be deputy leader of the opposition." Now, of course, I was very close to Freundel, so I was more focused on Freundel's death than anything else. I said, "Oh." He said, "You know, so if the fellas want you, you can't say no." I said, "Okay, well, I mean, I would have preferred to spend some time learning and so on, but if that's the way it has to be, so let it be." He said, "Okay, well, I am going to announce it at the party conference on Sunday." I said, "No problem." I came down to the party conference on Sunday, and at a time he chose, he made this announcement that I was going to be the deputy leader of the opposition from the following week. The auditorium appropriately and courteously rose and applauded. But once we got outside of the auditorium, I realized that certain members of the parliamentary group were very angry. They did not know anything about this. So I said to him, "But you said to me that the group met and all these fellas wanted me, but I am seeing some hostility all around me." He said, "Man, I don't mind that, man. Let's get on with the job. They've had their time, let us get on with the job." That's how I became deputy leader of the opposition between 1995 and there 1999. We lost the election in 1999. The party nearly got wiped out in that horrible election, which had some features about it which I think historians will have a chance to comment on in the fullness of time. But we spent the period after 1999 in the process of continuing to rebuild the party because it has suffered that traumatic shock. In the early 90s, the no confidence motion and the collapse of the government and so on. And David and I worked steadfastly on the rebuilding of the nerve of the Democratic Labour Party from 1994, when I came in, until January 2008, when I arrived here to greet him after it was clear that we had won the general election of 2008. Of course, thereby hangs a tale as well. Because coming across Culloden Road that night, I heard his voice saying that he was going to be sworn in as Prime Minister the following day, and that Freundel Stuart was going to be sworn in as Attorney General. When I got here, I saw him, and we greeted each other, embraced. He said, "You heard the news?" I said, "What news?" He said that you're going to be Attorney General. I said, "But you didn't discuss that with me. How do you know that I want to be Attorney General?" He said, "Well, if you don't want it, tell the people. I tell them already." And we got sworn in on the following day as agreed. And of course worked very closely together until his untimely illness and even more untimely death. David Thompson was a great human being, a very thoughtful and penetrating political thinker and politician. I always marveled at how much energy his adversaries had to use up when they were going after him, because it was not very easy to subdue him. And as I said on Sunday, I chuckle when people talk about what is going on now, because I don't think that any political leader of the Democratic Labour Party has had to endure as much venom and as much bile, as much bitterness as David Thompson had to endure between 1994 and the year 2000.
That's true.
And through it all, his steps never faltered. His confidence never waned. And the very simple reason for that is, as I said on Sunday, I'm repeating myself because these things are important. I quoted Earl Spencer, the brother of Princess Diana, who delivered the eulogy at Princess Diana's funeral. Earl Spencer said in that eulogy that genuine goodness is always a threat to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum. And because David's adversaries did not know how to handle him, they had to hate him, because that was the only way they could deal with him. And of course, he repaid their hatred with his love. I have never heard David Thompson in any conversation with me, and we had many conversations, really give expression to any hate, any visceral or inveterate dislike of any politician on the other side of the political divide. He understood political protocol and repaid the hate of his adversaries with his own unpretentious and unpretending affection. So that when all was said and done, even those who thought they hated him realized that after all, they liked and respected him. Of course, with one exception, a man who, even on the occasion of his death, on the occasion when the House of Assembly was paying tribute to him, could not take leave of his Lilliputian status and be a big man for a change. Even on that occasion, in the presence of Mara and the children and other members of the family, he had to give vent to an ungenerous spirit. I speak, of course, of the present leader of the opposition, and long may he remain the leader of the opposition. trying to repair the nerves of people in this organization, and sometimes you can get a little antsy when you are hearing noise coming from that side and not enough noise coming from this side. Look, I often say that I represent a constituency that is not too far from the Garrison Savannah. I pass and see horses training very often. When a horse is training by himself, he looks very, very fast. You tell yourself, it is impossible for him to be beaten because he's going around the track by himself. But it's on Gold Cup Day or on race day that you separate the real horses, the real winners from the pinchbeck ones. And we have a collection of pinchbeck successes in the Barbados Labour Party, as we will prove when I call the next election. So you don't get too worried, all will be well. They're so benighted. They're so benighted that I said 2 weekends ago at Durance that they had awakened a sleeping giant. They had never heard the expression before. And the expression awaken the sleeping giant, those words were used since the 7th of December 1941. And in the year 2012, they'd never heard them. Yeah. They were used by an admiral from Japan, Isakuro Yamamoto, an admiral who led the Japanese in the attack against Pearl Harbor in the United States of America. And he delivered himself of the words, because he didn't really agree that Pearl Harbor should have been attacked. And he said, you know, we may well have awakened a sleeping giant. But this is the first time the Barbados Labour Party was hearing it. So the best interpretation they could put on it is that I was saying that we were all asleep and we know wake up. Now you understand why the writer of the book of Proverbs said something like, answer not a fool according to the multitude of his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. But David Thompson contributed mightily, wisely, and profoundly to the life and the development of the Democratic Labour Party. He served as its assistant secretary, as its general secretary, and of course as its president and political leader, and of course later as Prime Minister of Barbados. There are some touching moments in our relationship, two of which I will share with you. When he was contemplating his last cabinet reshuffle, he called me at home to say that he was doing this thing, he was minded to do this thing, and he wanted to share some of his thinking with me. I said to him, David, yes, no problem with that, but I have to tell you this. Outside of the illness of my own mother, the illness and death of my own mother, and David was a pallbearer at my mother's funeral, I can think of no other experience that has brought me enough pain, brought me as much pain, as much anguish as what you are going through at the moment. And he ended the conversation. The phone clicked out, and that was the end of the conversation. I was to learn the following day that he shared this story with a confidant. And he said to that confidant, I felt so sad. I did not know that I was hurting Freundel so badly. This is a man ill, experiencing unimaginable inconvenience. But even in that state, he was still concerned about how he was affecting me, rather than being concerned about how he himself was being affected. That was very touching for me. When he eventually completed the arrangements for the reshuffle, he determined that I should see them before any public announcement was made. And he made arrangements for them to be delivered to me so that I could see them. They were delivered to me, and he called. I was on my way to St. Lucie to join other members of the cabinet to view an art collection at Colleton in St. Lucie. He called on my cell phone and he said, "You got what I sent to you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you looked at it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Is there anything you want to say to me? Are there any suggestions you want to make?" I said, "No, I think that what you have done here is quite reasonable given all the circumstances." And he said to me, "Freundel, thanks very much. Your turn is soon coming." I said, "But what are you talking about?" He said, "Just that. Your turn is soon coming." That too was a very touching experience for me. On the 23rd of October, 2010, he would be called to higher service. And tonight we are gathered here to reflect on all that he did to make us as big as we are tonight. All that he did to contribute to the life and to the energy of the Democratic Labour Party. Irene mentioned in her speech that some people have said that he served for too short a time as Prime Minister to have left any legacy. I've spoken on this issue already, but I did not speak to this audience on the issue, and therefore I'm going to repeat what I said at the Hilton Hotel when a book of quotations from David Thompson was launched, a book, of course, edited by the Minister of Education, the Honorable Ronald Jones. In 1961, incidentally, the year of David's birth, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was sworn in as President of the United States of America. John Kennedy served as President of the United States of America for 2 years and 10 months. And as recently as last night, people on MSNBC and CNN were quoting John Kennedy. And people here in Barbados still quote John Kennedy. They quote John Kennedy as saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." Those words came from the inaugural address he delivered at his swearing-in in 1961, January 1961. Of course, in that address, he said some other important things. That is what is quoted. He also said in that address, a quotation which I think is equally important, that civility, by which he meant politeness, civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. That was John Kennedy in 1961. But, as I said, the more familiar quotation is, ask not what you can do for your country, but ask what. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. John Kennedy did not build any big buildings in the United States of America. But he erected a monument in the minds of people that 51 years after his death, people are still quoting. And long after we are gone, people will still be quoting, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The point I want to make is that legacies are not all things that you can see and touch. The more important legacies are those legacies which people erect in the minds of people. David Thompson, 2 years and 9 months as Prime Minister, but in that short time gave a reminder to Barbadians which I don't think we'll ever forget. We heard it here tonight. That this country is not just an economy, it is also a society. Simple words, but he spoke them at a time when the country needed to hear them. He spoke them at a time of maximum receptivity in Barbados, and has planted those words in the hearts and minds of our people. Our adversaries believe, like the slave masters of the 17th and 18th centuries, that Barbados is only an economy. But there's some finer things of life that go beyond economy, go beyond buying and selling, go beyond producing and consuming, go beyond saving and investing. There are things that go to the very core of who we are and how we ought to see ourselves. And David Thompson, in the short time he was Prime Minister, targeted that area of our existence. So for as long as we are around, and long after we are gone, David Thompson will be remembered for bringing us face to face with the fact that we are just not economic beings. We are also social beings. That we're not just about eating and drinking, producing and consuming, buying and selling, but we are about how we relate to one another, how we perceive one another, and what we are prepared to do to enrich the lives of one another. That is enough to recommend David Thompson to me, and it is certainly enough to recommend him to those who will write his biographies, those who will write the history of the period that accounts for his existence in the public life of Barbados. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight. to pay tribute to my fallen friend. And as I said, we can't recall him from the vasty deep. The best we can do is to pray for the unceasing refreshment of his soul in paradise. But the highest tribute we can pay to him is to internalize those things for which he stood and try to so relate to one another, both as party members and as citizens of Barbados, and as people of the Caribbean, as inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere, that it will be shown that the sacrifices, the contribution, the insights of David Thompson were not in vain. May my good friend continue to rest in peace. Thank you very much.